The morning I peeled a bright fluorescent violation notice off my front door was the exact same morning that 5 members of the Whispering Pines HOA board opened their mailboxes and discovered federal subpoenas waiting inside. But that's getting ahead of the story. To explain how everything unraveled, I need to go back to the day I first arrived in the supposedly peaceful suburban neighborhood and introduce myself to Brenda Vance, the HOA president who would soon learn that interfering with a cybersecurity contractor's internet connection is an exceptionally bad idea. My name is Elias Thorne. I work remotely as a consultant for several government-related organizations whose names rarely appear in public and whose operations are best left unadvertised. When I purchased the property at 47 Oakwood Drive, I chose it for 3 very practical reasons. First, it included an extra bedroom that could easily be transformed into a dedicated office. Second, the backyard offered enough open space for the communications equipment I needed without disturbing the neighbors. Third, the previous owner had already installed a reinforced concrete pad in exactly the right location for a backup diesel generator. What I completely failed to anticipate was Brenda Vance's obsessive desire to control every detail of neighborhood life. She monitored lawns, decorations, mailbox flags, and apparently even a flow of digital information through her little empire. Brenda was the kind of person who dressed in pressed business jackets for weekend yard sales. She carried a steel measuring tape in her handbag, so she could personally verify whether a homeowner's grass exceeded the community's covenant limit of 2.5 inches. Section 1B, if anyone was curious, at one point, she fined my next-door neighbor $200 because a ceramic fraud decoration in his yard was facing the house rather than the street. I'm not exaggerating. Brenda claimed that HOA design standards required all lawn ornaments to face outward in order to provide a welcoming appearance for visitors. My own conflict with her began about 3 weeks after moving in. I had recently completed installation of a private satellite communications terminal, something my contracts require for maintaining secure, encrypted connections. The dish sat atop a 10-foot mast in the farthest corner of my backyard. I had painted it a muted gray and positioned it behind a row of mature Leland cypress trees. From the street, it was completely invisible. Yet, somehow Brenda discovered it. Maybe she noticed the installer's truck parked outside. Maybe she caught a glimpse of the reflector edge from her second-floor window. Or maybe her famous bird-watching station, equipped with powerful binoculars that seemed far more interested in driveways and wildlife, played a role. Whatever the reason, the first violation notice arrived on a Tuesday. It was printed on expensive cream-colored cardstock bearing the Whispering Pines crest and signed with Brenda's elaborate purple signature. The citation referenced violation number 9. Unauthorized telecommunications infrastructure detrimental to neighborhood aesthetics. Included was a $50 fine payable within 7 days. I tossed the letter into a drawer and assumed common sense would eventually prevail. That was my first mistake. Never underestimate the determination of an HOA ruler armed with a color-coded binder and a personal grudge. Exactly 1 week later, a second notice appeared. The penalty had doubled to $100 for what was described as ongoing intentional noncompliance. It also introduced a brand new accusation. According to the letter, my equipment was generating excessive radio frequency emissions during designated electronic quiet hours between 10 at night and 6 in the morning, a rule I was certain nobody had ever heard of before that day. Brenda claimed my satellite uplink was flooding the cul-de-sac with disruptive energy fields. In response, I sent a professional letter explaining the applicable federal regulations. I attached the relevant portions of FCC Rule 47 CFR 1.4000, which specifically prevents homeowners associations from prohibiting satellite dishes under 1 meter in diameter. I even included several court rulings that reinforced the same principle. I honestly believed that would settle the matter. Instead, Brenda decided to escalate. The following Saturday at exactly 8:03 a.m., I opened my door to find her standing on my porch. She wore a navy blue power suit and an HOA identification badge large enough to resemble a sheriff's badge. 2 board members stood silently behind her, both carrying expressions that suggested they would rather be somewhere else entirely. Her hair was pulled back, so tightly it seemed to drag her eyebrows halfway toward the top of her head. holding a clipboard like protective armor and speaking loudly enough for neighboring houses to hear every word. She announced that my satellite installation represented a direct threat to community network security. She claimed several residents had reported interference affecting baby monitors and garage door openers. According to Brenda, my equipment might even be intercepting transmissions from hostile foreign entities. When I asked who had filed the complaints, she cited confidentiality. When I requested copies of written reports, she admitted the complaints were verbal. And when I asked to review the previous month's meeting minutes, she informed me that the board secretary was still catching up on paperwork. She was improvising at an Olympic level. Yet every invented claim came out with the calm confidence of someone who had never once been challenged in her life. After that, things around the neighborhood escalated quickly. At the community pool, she told Widow Henderson in a hushed tone that I was allegedly running some kind of dark web streaming operation. A few minutes later, she was loudly insisting to anyone within earshot that she had personally detected Ka-band signal irregularities matching known Russian transponder patterns along my property line. It was clear she had watched one too many Cold War documentaries and had now promoted herself to Whispering Pine's unofficial counterintelligence officer. Then came the morning she crossed another line entirely and decided to conduct what she likely considered an inspection. I was in the middle of a classified video teleconference when my phone lit up a motion alert, live feed enabled. There she was, Brenda Vance, dressed in a pencil skirt and nude heels, attempting to climb my 6-foot cedar fence. A Yorkshire Terrier peered out from her designer handbag like a tiny lookout tower. She managed to climb only a couple of rungs before physics, and poor judgment combined against her. She lost her balance and toppled backward straight into my hydrangea bushes, letting out a shriek that probably could have been detected on seismic equipment. I saved the entire 4,000 frame clip and backed it up in 3 separate secure locations. In my line of work, you never lose documentation. Most people would have taken that moment as a sign to step back and reconsider their choices. Brenda did the opposite. Instead, she produced what she clearly believed was her magnum opus, a 9-page formal complaint sent to the FCC, the State Attorney General, an entirely fictional Bureau of Electromagnetic Compliance, accusing me of operating an unauthorized intelligence-gathering platform that endangered regional spectrum integrity. She also demanded that Apex Communications, the HOA's preferred internet provider, immediately terminate service to my address in the name of protecting domestic bandwidth sovereignty. Here's the problem with reporting satellite equipment to federal authorities when the owner actually works with those same authorities. It doesn't disappear into a filing cabinet. It gets tracked. It gets reviewed. And in my case, it landed directly on the desk of my program manager, Colonel Marcus Hayes, U.S. Army Ret., currently assigned to a very quiet corner of the intelligence community. My phone rang at 14:17 on a Thursday. No caller ID, just a secure encrypted handshake tone. When I answered, Hayes didn't even bother with greetings. He was already laughing. Try to figure out why a suburban warlord is trying to flag you at the FCC, he said. Then, in his exact words, Mr. Thorne, are you aware someone has formally reported your fully cleared, DoD-vetted satellite terminal as a probable hostile foreign surveillance node? I could hear him struggling not to laugh through the sentence. I told him I was painfully aware and asked whether he wanted the full archive of HOA citations I had been quietly collecting. Send everything, he replied, then added, and make sure I got Brenda Vance's full name and address while you're at it. What followed was a textbook exercise in federal bureaucracy being applied with surgical precision. 48 hours later, in the middle of Brenda's Sacred Thursday afternoon book club, complete with tiny sandwiches, white wine, and aggressively tasteful seasonal decor, black SUVs with government plates rolled quietly to a stop outside her home. Mrs. Higgins, who treats her front window like a live broadcast studio, immediately texted me, "You need to see this." 2 agents in dark suits stepped out, sunglasses still on despite the overcast sky, and walked up with the calm certainty of men who are never questioned. Brenda opened the door holding a 3-tier tray of crustless cucumber sandwiches, like she was hosting a diplomatic reception. They identified her, confirmed her full name, and informed her they needed to ask a few questions regarding her recent allegations of espionage-level activity at 47 Oakwood Drive. Inside, The entire book club had crowded around the bay window, watching in stunned silence as Brenda was questioned on her own porch for nearly 2 hours. The agents remained polite, almost gentle in the way surgeons are right before they begin an operation. They asked her how she determined the presence of Russian transponders. They asked her to explain what she believed an intelligence node actually was in technical terms. They were particularly intrigued by the professionally styled letterhead she had created for something she called the Bureau of Electromagnetic Safety, an agency that, after about 30 seconds of searching, even the book club members could confirm did not exist anywhere outside her imagination. By the time the agents left, Brenda looked like she had aged 10 years in a single afternoon, but that was only the beginning. The following week, the real FCC contacted me directly, actual field engineers, not a complaint inbox. They verified my terminal's licensing status and apologized for the inconvenience. At the same time, they confirmed they were opening an investigation into Brenda for filing fraudulent interference claims and intentionally obstructing Part 25 licensed communications equipment. Not long after, the State Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division sent her a thick formal notice outlining the legal consequences of knowingly making false reports to federal authorities. Apex Communications' legal team followed with a certified cease and desist order, explicitly forbidding her from ever again implying she had authority to speak on behalf of the company. One by one, every institution she tried to weaponize turned back toward her instead. That's when I decided it was time to shift from defense to offense. I organized a neighborhood internet and cybersecurity awareness seminar and delivered flyers to every mailbox in Whispering Pines. The announcement promised guest speakers from the Department of Homeland Security and included complimentary refreshments. 47 of 60 households showed up, some residents who hadn't attended any public gathering in decades. Agent Carter, an associate from a previous contract, flew in specifically for the event. He delivered a precise, no-nonsense presentation explaining the difference between real cybersecurity threats and the paranoid scenarios usually associated with conspiracy thinking. He ended his talk with a slide titled Federal Penalties for Interference with Licensed Communications Infrastructure, listing statutes such as 18 U.S.C. Section 1362, carrying up to 10 years in prison, and 47 U.S.C. Section 333, regarding willful interference with licensed spectrum. The room temperature seemed to drop instantly. Nearly every head slowly turned toward Brenda's conspicuously empty seat. The next HOA meeting on Tuesday was packed wall to wall. I arrived carrying a briefcase, a laser pointer, and the calm confidence of someone holding all the leverage. Brenda was already seated at the head table, wearing a beige cardigan that looked less like fashion and more like surrender. When new business began, I was recognized. I connected my laptop to projector and opened a 42-slide presentation titled, How Not to Commit Federal Felonies Over Your Neighbor's Wi-Fi. Slide 3 highlighted FCC regulations. Slide 7 referenced official advisory bulletins. Slide 12 displayed a legally obtained 4K frame of Brenda dangling from my fence, while her Yorkshire Terrier stared out her handbag like a witness to disaster. The room erupted in laughter. Someone in the back shouted, "Zoom in on the shoes." Slide 19 showed a recorded exchange between Brenda and an Apex Communications representative, in which she confidently claimed my satellite dish was broadcasting Marxist propaganda on the 19.2 gigahertz band. The rep could be heard struggling not to laugh on a recorded line. By slide 38, detailing statutory penalties, the room had gone completely silent. I then made a motion. I proposed an immediate vote of no confidence in HOA President Brenda Vance, citing her exposure to potential federal liability and the reputational damage inflicted on the community. A brief pause followed. The charter required only a simple majority. Ballots were distributed. Brenda sat motionless, staring forward as if hoping stillness could undo reality. The result was unanimous, 47-0. Even her longtime ally, the treasurer who had supported her for 8 years, voted for removal. Brenda stood slowly, gathered her purse and what little dignity remained, and walked what felt like a final march toward the exit. As she passed, someone's toddler loudly announced, "The mean lady is in timeout forever." Nervous laughter rippled through the room. At the door, Brenda paused, turned back, and said through clenched emotion, You people have no idea what you've done. This neighborhood will fall apart without standards. I stood and replied calmly, standards matter, Brenda. So does avoiding federal prison. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Then she left. The door closed with the soft finality of a gavel. We never saw her at another meeting again. 3 weeks later, word spread that Brenda had taken a part-time job at Apex Communications. The same company she had tried to shut down was now paying her $19 an hour to answer phones and say, "Thank you for calling Apex. This is Brenda. How may I assist you?" Rumor quickly spread that half the neighborhood started calling in just to hear her answer. 6 months later, the FCC officially closed its case. No criminal charges were filed, but she received a $15,000 civil penalty for filing false reports and a permanent cease and desist order. When the certified envelope requiring her signature arrived, Mrs. Higgins, still stationed at her window like a neighborhood commentator, later said the scream carried clean across the street and echoed off every vinyl-sided wall in Whispering Pines. And that's how HOA conflicts tend to end when they meet reality.